Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and author of the new book coming out on November 21st, but you can order it right now and have it in time for your Thanksgiving read as you go drift in and out of your turkey coma. You can get a hold of a copy of the 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Lifeway, Walmart, anywhere books are sold. You can get your copy of this, my new book, coming out for formal release on November 21st, but I think they're shipping them now. We're here this morning, and we welcome you to talk with Chrissie Kahan, who is a second-time guest on the program. The last time she and her husband were on with us, we were talking about navigating the road to infertility, and we just got a personal update. They were guests on our program on the second week that we were live, and so we've watched them grow in their ministry. And Chrissie, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Exciting to be back. I'm so happy for you and your following.
Well, thank you so much. Chrissie has been an educator for 13 years and an elementary assistant principal for the past 8 years. And as an assistant principal, one of her job responsibilities has been to be the IEP, Individualized Education Plan, and SST, Student Support Team Chair, who facilitates meetings for students with disabilities. And she has written a book called Roadmap to Navigating Your Child's Disability. And when this came to me, I started to think about the fact of how illiterate I am in every one of the acronyms that goes along with the disabilities.
Yes.
Back in the day, you were just a wild child. You were precocious, I think was the overarching word. Then we had ADD and ADHD, and then autism, Asperger's, and we've introduced a whole host in the last 10 or 15 years of maladies and ailments and diagnosis and disabilities and challenges and dyslexia and just so many things that, first of all, it's just so hard to grasp the magnitude and the cause. And my question to you, Chrissie, because I know you and husband are people of very, very strong faith, is this, and this is not to diminish in any way the families who right now are trying to navigate the right medications, whether it be Ritalin or whether it be Ativan or whatever is available to them pharmacologically or programmatically. But is there a spiritual component to this that we're just not mounting up the level of attack that we need to take on, because our children are under attack in a magnificent way?
Absolutely. I think there is, and I can speak to it from my own spiritual journey with someone who was not diagnosed with depression or anxiety as a child. And my faith is very strong. I was in church every Sunday, and I just thought it was the natural way in my mind to think negatively. But actually, prayer is what changed my life. So at 22, when I started listening to Joyce Meyer and learning about my thinking and how God wanted me to think and using scripture to battle my depression, it changed my life. And so I feel like God has kind of made my purpose to help other kids understand it's okay. I think why we're hearing about it so much more is because things have changed educationally. You're right. It used to be, kids with disabilities, they were on a special bus. They were at a special school. Now everybody is together, but I'm not sure we're having the talks we need to with our students, with our families, to help them understand, because there's a level of shame that goes with it.
Early on, when I planted the congregation that I planted, a man came in and he always sat by himself, and he spoke to no one, and no one ever spoke to him. And I began to notice it, and I made it my point that I was going to greet him, meet him, get to know him, become friends with him, because he seems so isolated.
Yeah.
I then had a couple who came to me and told me about the young child who had, excuse me, who had issues with public situations and with interaction with people, and I began to recognize some of the similarities, and I asked the family, well, has somebody given you a diagnosis? And they said, yes, Asperger's. Excuse me.
Sure.
Asperger syndrome. And so I began to say, well, what does that look like, and what does that mean, and what does that do? I mean, I've heard of things like Tourette syndrome, and I'm a little familiar with autism. And so they told me, and I began to recognize that there were similarities between these two individuals, and I asked, well, what do I do? How should I approach? How should I combat? What can I do? Excuse me. And this individual has now become a good friend and actually traveled to Israel with me, and was fabulous to travel with as part of a group, and is not the same person that I met 10 years ago.
Yes.
And the only thing that has changed, because he hasn't changed, his wiring hasn't changed.
Correct.
It's how people interact with him. So he didn't get rewired, we got rewired.
Yes.
And now it's a non-issue. It's not a factor. It plays no part. It might in his life as he meets new people in other situations, but in the world that I know them, it's a non-issue. It doesn't exist. It's not there anymore. It has no impact. Why are we hearing so much about this? Is it because people are finally taking it out of the darkness, or what's the genesis of it? Was it the medical world that began to name and identify? Was it the educational world? Because I think that the greatest area of impact has been on public education.
Yes.
In trying to figure out, because I was one of those kids. Now, I was one of those kids in the 50s.
Wow.
And my problem is that I couldn't read. And I couldn't read the way other kids learned to sight read.
Right. You needed a different way.
I had to learn listening to 78 LPs and reading books phonetically. And so I learned to read phonetically. Now, at age 8, I had read every book that Charles Dickens had ever written.
Wow.
But that was my reading, because see Dick run, see Jane run, see Spot run, Spot run, didn't work with me. I needed to learn phonetically and contextually how to read, which now gives me the ability in my 60s to do 3 live author interviews a day, and having read all their books the day before
phenomenal.
I interview them. Well, that was a skill that was developed during that period of time of what would be called a learning disability today.
Yeah, it would.
Okay.
So what has changed, I think, our expectations of kids. So I know in my state, in Maryland, we used to only have like half-day kindergarten. There used to be a lot more sensory, like play, napping. That's gone. It's now full-day kindergarten. Kindergarten is pretty much first grade level expectations. We have state curricular expectations for these kids about where they should be. There's a lot more testing. There's a lot less recess. All that is playing into it. And then medically, yes. I mean, the medical breakthroughs with diagnoses and alternate therapies, different medicines, that's playing a part in it. But autism, there are a lot of different studies and research happening. They don't know if maybe it's food, but there has been a huge increase in the autistic population, including Asperger's. And the thing about the autism spectrum is it's so wide, and there can be similar characteristics, but autistic kids are not all, they don't all act the same way.
Well, I know that when I was in college in the 60s and was a elementary education major with a special ed minor, we had 3 categories: educable, functional, and teachable.
Yep.
That was it. That was the entire spectrum of special education. In looking in category called mental retardation was the classification.
Yes.
In Pittsburgh, where I grew up, we actually had a building called the Crippled Children's Home. Imagine the political incorrectness of that existence today.
No, I can't.
But that was it, the name of it in large letters. And that's where, because there was polio at the time, that's where the polio kids lived and went to and lived at the Crippled Children's Home. And I knew kids. I played with kids that we were in a walking area. It was in the neighborhood, if you will. Right in the middle of a residential area was the Crippled Children's Home. People would flip out today if you put up a building and that's what you called it. But that's where these issues were addressed, and this is where families would send their children to get whatever assistance they could. But in your book, which is, I don't think people know that you are King Khan Publishing, as well as an expert, in my opinion, in infertility because of your journey.
Yes.
And because of your profession, your heart for children, your desire for children, and your teaching parents how to navigate this could have been of quite a clinical piece, but you chose to approach this as a non-clinical, more of a book that when I put it on my bookshelf, as a family would, I would not hide this book.
Thank you.
There's plenty of books with big words. ADHD, the clinician's handbook. You want to hide because you don't want anybody to know that you're dealing with that in the family.
Absolutely.
This cute cover, glossy, looks like it's a children's book, but this is by no means a children's book.
Yeah.
This is a roadmap for navigating your child's disability. I know of very few people in the world that are hateful, despicable, loathing, offenders, but the vernacular of the day has been so complicated to navigate that every one of us is prone to saying the wrong thing at the wrong time to the wrong person and having it become so offensive and so problematic that unless I put quotation marks around the name of the building that happened to exist, I did not name the building. I'm just telling you what the building said. I probably offended somebody just by even reminding them that in the 50s and 60s that this building existed.
Yes.
The building's still there. It's been modernized. The name has been changed, of course, much more sensitivity. I think that there are 2 very clear areas that I want to pursue with you today.
Sure.
One is what the parent needs to do to navigate, and then the general population. What do we need to do in Walmart when we're exposed to the behaviors that we don't understand, and we immediately assume bad parent, too liberal,
Right.
no discipline. Boy, that parent really needs to get a hold of that child, because we have no ability to recognize that this is Tourette's syndrome, or this is Asperger's, or this is autism, or this is that. We are so quick to judge.
Yes.
And honestly, I almost think believers are worse.
I agree.
The believers are more judgmental, saying, well, that family needs to get those kids to church, and they need to get the Lord in them, and they need to get right with the Lord, and they wouldn't have these problems, and I'm just going to go over there and I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. Well, if you give them a piece of your mind, you might not have much left. So I don't think you have enough to give away.
Right.
So let's start with navigating these terminologies and helping people understand what this is all about, because it is complicated. You almost need an MD today.
Right. It really is like another language. And so even though I could speak to something on a clinical level, I didn't really get my education until I tried to foster to adopt, and I was a parent of 2 girls with extensive disabilities. And it was not disabilities that you would see. So it wasn't Down syndrome. It wasn't anything physically wrong with them. It was ADHD. It was post-traumatic stress disorder, oppositional defiance, a lot of mental disabilities. And so I very much was that parent in the grocery store having to set limits, and it changed my whole perspective. As an educator, you know, we're so excited, I think, when we learn these terms that we just throw them out. We just throw these acronyms out, but they can be very intimidating and very overwhelming to all people. I don't care how many degrees you have. You can look at my chapter 1 and not know what all of those mean, because they're always changing.
Right. So how do you start navigating this? Where does it begin? Does it begin with a phone call from the school that says, Mr. and Mrs. Kahan, we need to see you?
Usually, or it's usually a comment in the report card. If you're getting phone calls from your teacher talking about how the child can't sit still, they're not paying attention, like Susie or Tommy in the class, if they're acting out behaviorally, then that's usually a good starting point. And what happens is usually the school will initiate that. But if the parent is seeing an increase in phone calls, an increase in behavior from the school, the parent can also initiate that and start and say, you know, I'd really like to have a conference to talk about this with the school.
Now, do all schools have somebody like yourself that are in this role?
All schools do have someone. They should have support within the school. It might not be my specific title, but every school is required to legally implement IEPs. So there's someone knowledgeable there about disabilities. There's also usually a team. So every school usually has a psychologist. They might be assigned to 2 or 3 different schools, a guidance counselor, special educators. Those are the support personnel that makes up the team.
So Individualized Education Program, IEP,
Yes.
is within our Department of Education now the standard that says that schools are required to create, based on the needs of the child, resources, coaching, tutoring, intervention, counseling. How much have we abdicated to the school, and how much do the parents actually participate in this? Have we kind of said, okay, great, the education department now has these programs and my kid's going to that, and so I can go off to work and go do what I have to do, and if he's still acting out, I can pick up the phone and say, hey, what you're doing is not working.
Right.
You need to bump it up a notch because I'm pretty disappointed with your results.
You have a spectrum. You have a spectrum of parents and schools out there. It's on both ends. So where we've grown in understanding we need to develop these plans if we suspect a disability, sometimes we have things written on those plans that aren't actually being done for the child. So it's very important that it's a collaboration between the school and the parents, and that the parents are a part of all those plans. They give input, they understand what that means, and we work together. Because if it's in isolation at home or at school, it's not going to carry over for the child.
Is there, within the program, are there resources, the resources within the school for the child? What resources as a parent are available to me?
So as a school, someone who does this as the expert, I do give parents resources because I found that's what I needed as a parent, and parenting is the most important job in the world. You don't have all these hours to Google online what to do, and that was really the intent behind my book. So in chapter 3, it breaks down every disability that I see in public education the most in an inclusion setting. So that's where everybody's included. And so within chapter 3, I have the disability, what it means, what the symptoms look like, the best accommodations in school, and then resources that parents can check out so they can really hone in on that specific disability and know where to go.
In chapter 2, which I found very, very interesting, the concept of the team,
yes,
is introduced. And I think somewhere along the line we've developed this attitude that we drop our children off at school and the school has this assigned responsibility, and there's a framework in which we expect our children to learn to read, write, do math, do all these things, and we then, the way we gauge is by their homework, are they doing their homework, and then we get the report card.
right.
In the area of disability management, this is not a short-term fix. This is a long-term process. In many cases, it's a lifelong process. And the earlier you develop your involvement in, first of all, building the team and partnering as a team, the better equipped you are in later life to assemble an adult-oriented team. We're starting out in the child's realm now, saying how do we navigate elementary school, middle school, and high school?
Yes.
And is there the reasonable expectation that if we navigate it properly now, we can equip a percentage of these children to go on to higher education and to regain a position in society that previously, 25, 30 years ago, was not available to them? That
Yes.
was not the intention of the program. The intention was to isolate, separate, and create an institution where that's where we had to make the hard decision. Do I put my child in an institution, or am I able to take care of them myself? Okay.
And that's a good point. And I think one of the most powerful stories out there, and I refer to her in my book, is the old 80s video 2020 about a little girl named Carly who was nonverbal, and she shook, and she was told by, her parents were told by psychiatrists she will never develop past the age of 9 in her mind, and put her in an institution. And they spent thousands upon thousands for therapists. They couldn't do it. And when Carly learned to use a keyboard, this vocabulary that came out, and this person, it was the first insight into autism. It was incredible. She is now a nonverbal reporter who interviewed Channing Tatum. And so if she had been institutionalized, we would have missed out on her potential. So really, it is helping these kids know what's going on with them, giving them the strategies to cope with it, so they can be successful, because they are our orchids. And that's what I talk about in the book. Most kids are dandelions. I love dandelions. They're great, but they can grow anywhere. They don't need a special environment. Our orchids are our kids with disabilities. They need exactly the right type of support.
We're talking with Chrissie Kahan, author of Roadmap to Navigating Your Child's Disability, an illustrated book that talks about IEP, FBA, BIP, 504, SST, SLD, ADHD, autism, every one of these acronyms, every one of these confusing programs. But you as a parent, you as a grandparent, you as a friend of a family who have members of their families dealing with this all the time, not only is this a great resource for them, but it's a great resource for you to help them to be a part of that team as you're helping out, as maybe you're sitting for the child, or you're providing assistance as a friend, family, or church member in understanding some of what these issues are and some of the resources available. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to dig into the dramatic shift over the last 15 years in resources that are available to families, both at the federal, state, and local level, through the education system and through the medical community, to begin to partner to take this team that once we thought was just for the educational, that now can expand into the social and governmental environment. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with Chrissie Kahan, author of Roadmap to Navigating Your Child's Disability. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere, and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our one-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Chrissie Kahan, author of Roadmap to Navigating Your Child's Disability. Chrissie, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back.
Chrissie, this is a process.
Yes.
It's a process that begins with observation of a parent, of something that they notice but often go into denial. Then a relative or friend alludes to it and the defensive posture takes over, and we go through this whole kind of you can almost check off the boxes of what we go through until we finally hear what we've dreaded all along in hearing, that maybe after a period of 2, 3, 4, 5 years of trying to live with and to try to manage or pray it out or push it out or construct an environment, we finally get this diagnosis and one of these acronyms that I don't even know what they mean. How does the parent, how do you counsel that parent who finally sits down, takes a deep breath and says, oh my goodness, if I would have just done something 5 years ago when I noticed the problem,
Right.
would my child be better off today? What do I do with that?
It's a process, and again, it's about your relationship with the family, and that's why the school role is so critical, because so many parents do feel ashamed. They feel like they're being judged if their child does have a disability or could potentially have a disability, and they really just don't want people to know. So it's about your openness. I'm very open with my families. Last year, I had 2 students who were suicidal, and because of the relationship with the families, they came to me for support. I got them the right resources because the child had a relationship with us that was positive. They shared their plan to commit suicide. We got them to the right institution, the right medications. We worked together, and now the child is back in school. He has the right plan. He has outside counseling that comes in and works with us, and it's a constant collaboration. But I know many parents that would have shied away from that and been so embarrassed they would never tell someone. And really, it's your child. You want to do whatever you can, but you have to take that blaming away from you, and no matter when you're getting help, you're getting help. It's going to be okay.
What do we do in this world of social media when all of our friends are posting their child's picture at the soccer game and getting the trophy, and at the baseball game getting the trophy, and we're looking at those pictures of our friends and neighbors and other classmates of maybe the siblings of the one child who is not able to participate or has those issues? How, what counsel, what support? It's almost like Disabilities Anonymous. Hi, my name is Eric, and my daughter has Asperger's, or hi, my name is Eric, and my daughter has autism, or whatever it may be. That is there support for the parent? Are there groups that are now gathering together as communities to provide the kind of support to take this "what did I do wrong" mentality? Did I eat the wrong things during my pregnancy? Did I give them the inoculation and now they're saying that it was the mercury and it caused autism, and I was on the fence about flu shots, but I went ahead and got them anyways, and look how it turned out. And there's just so many factors, and there's so many fingers pointing. I think that Robert Kennedy Jr., his RFK's son, is now out advocating and talking about this particular issue in the medical field, that they knew all along that there were things that shouldn't have been and that they let happen. And so we're so prone to get a pill, a shot, a pharmacological solution, but these disabilities there's no magic pill.
No, there isn't. And I think, to speak to your question of support, that is one great thing about social media, is no matter what disability you or your child has, there's a support group for that. I put some links in chapter 3 to go along with each disability. But even if you're just on Facebook and you search it, there are a ton of social groups and supports. The Mighty is a really good one for parents. That's one I've been following recently. I think the world is trying to break through and speak to these disabilities. There was a viral video going around about a little girl who was singing in her choir for the first time. I don't know if you saw it, and everybody's standing there still singing, and she is feeling the beat. She is moving around. She's having a good time. I think sometimes we have the wrong perspective. We're trying to get everybody to fit inside one box, and that doesn't happen. And the people that have disabilities are outside of the box, and they see the world in such an interesting, unique way and have so many gifts to offer that we could learn a lot by their perspective. Just as you spoke of as with your friend with Asperger's, how you adapted.
Well, that's exactly right. What's interesting is in your chapter 3, you break it down to the characteristics of the disability, the best accommodations for the school, how to deal with impulse control, daily organization. I think these are some practical tools that people can apply. They just don't know where to begin. They don't know how to start on the process. I want things to get better, but do I have to do this on my own?
Right.
Does every child's disability is different, but every disability family is pretty much the same in the fact that they want what's best for their child. They're willing to do almost anything. They just don't really know where to start.
Yes. And the other thing is that, not everybody who doesn't have a disability, they're not at the same level of understanding with what those disabilities are and the best accommodations. And that includes educators. I had a parent come to me this year. It's a brand new teacher. Her neighbor is having difficulty with the school, and the teacher said, I don't know anything about ADHD. I've never had ADHD. I don't know what to do for a kid with ADHD, and just at a loss. And I think that can be frustrating too, because then you as a parent become the expert and you have to teach trained professionals what to do.
Let's step out of the parent and educator role for a moment. And is the child aware? Does the child know that they're different, that something's going on? Is there a certain sensitivity? Is there a certain awareness of, and if there is, what impact does that play, and how do we sensitize? It's one thing about the teachers and the team and the parents, but there's also peers, and peer today seems to be the largest influencer in many of these young people's lives.
Absolutely. And that's why, you know, trying to spread that awareness. My first children's book was Benny Gator. It's about my dog who has anxiety, and it was intended to start the discussion. And I've shared it with my school. One boy he was a third grader. He was so excited when I shared the book because he has anxiety, and he wanted to shout it from the rooftops. This is what I have, you know, this is how you can help me. And his parent didn't want anyone to know. So it was interesting because little people, they know something's off. They know they're different in some way. And it actually becomes a relief when they know what they have and how to cope with it. Now, I have also seen kids use it as an excuse. Oh, I can't do that. I have ADHD. No, you can. You have to. This is how we compensate. So it's a really fine balance, but I think we definitely, through our increase in technology and advances, we need to educate our kids on disabilities and what they're seeing with their peers.
When that topic comes up at the dinner table about the child, and let's say that the parents aren't exposed to these children in a school setting, but they are exposed to some of these children in a church setting.
Yes.
And that's really probably more of the exposure, either the church or in social public settings, restaurants, grocery stores, malls, those kind of environments. What should our response be? What should our sensitivities be? How can we be better human beings, whether or not better Christians, but better human beings in observing a family interaction and reshaping our thinking to understand that maybe there's something more to this than we understand? And is there something we can do to assist, or is it better just to stay out of it? What should we do, or what can we do?
So one of the best resources I found we showed to the school, and I posted on the school's Facebook page, and it has to do with kids who have autism and Asperger's and what you can do if they're having an episode. It talks about like the wiring in their brains versus everyone else, and how that might mean to soothe themselves. They might bang their head on things. That's a way they're soothing themselves. So you want to be careful. You don't want to like stare. You also don't want to go up and be like, oh my God, what's wrong? How can I help you? Because they might not be able to verbalize how they're feeling. So I think getting to know that family and reaching out and just saying, hey, you know, is there anything I can help with? You know, what does Susie like to do? What is she interested in? Kids with Asperger's especially usually have something they latch onto that they really, really like. A child the other day loves maps, loves to write lists, and will talk to you about history all day long. So I think it's really just letting the family know you're not judging them, you want to support them, but you don't know how. And what can you do as a Christian? I have to commend my church. When my girls were rolling around under the pew and not listening, you know, they were very, very supportive. And I did have to educate them on post-traumatic stress disorder and what it looked like, because it looks very different, and you do feel embarrassed as a parent when it happens.
The only movie that I can think of that comes to mind is Rain Man, as being one of the movies where somebody with a disability that we might be able to recognize was brought into the mainstream.
Right.
Are there other movies which is a medium of education? People like movies. They're often drawn to movies. In some cases, maybe more than reading a book. They'd rather be visually stimulated.
Right.
Are there any resources you can recommend, movies to see, that will help people understand the social impact of families with children with disabilities, and how to be more supportive or more understanding, or even to recognize that it's not a behavioral disorder, it is something much more and needs to be viewed as something different?
Absolutely. Sesame Street just introduced their first character with autism. I know they're trying to spread awareness through that. A popular one with adults is Big Bang Theory. Everybody knows Sheldon. You know, Sheldon is someone who clearly has Asperger's. There's Young Sheldon, which is the spin-off of that. And that's set back when he was growing up. So that's a good one to look at. In regards to Asperger's. With anxiety, I found the best resource I found is gozen.com, and it has videos for parents and kids to really help. But if you go on YouTube and you search out, I usually like to search out how the disability makes a child feel, because I think it's more powerful hearing from a child what happens than anyone else.
I was at a store the other day, and a young lady helped me at a Best Buy, and she had a very unique accent. And so I got to talk to her, and I said to her, it's been great talking to you, and she said, thank you. And I said, I recognize a little bit of your accent, but it's hard to place. And she said, oh, it's not an accent, it's a speech impediment. I said, oh, how interesting. She said, yes.
Yeah.
Myself and my two sisters were born with a speech impediment. I'm able to speak much better than they are. But all of us now can communicate effectively, and I'm in now a customer support role. But we all had the same speech impediment, and I still have trouble doing some R's and L's, but very comfortable with it. I said, you know, that's kind of interesting, because my sister was a speech therapist. And so I said, you know, I'm very proud of you and what you've accomplished, and want to encourage you.
That's nice.
In Israel, people learn to speak English, but they learn to speak English with the accent of their English teacher. So if you're talking to Israeli and he's speaking to you in English, he might have a South African accent, and you're prone to say, well, are you from South Africa? No, I was born here in Israel. Then why do you have a South African accent? Well, because the person that taught me English was from South Africa. Or they have a Russian accent. Well, the person that taught them English had a Russian. Or they have a French accent. Well, the person who taught them English had a French accent. And so when you begin to see a little bit more of the influences in how things impact us, we become much more sensitive towards the stimuli.
Yes.
You know, I can get overstimulated. I find periods of withdrawal. I'd rather be by myself.
Yeah.
Is that a social disability? I'm surrounded by people all the time. But I did that as a child as well, because I couldn't keep up in the area of reading the way they could. So I would withdraw. And so, you know, here it is 60 years later. Do you still maintain some of that? Well, you do if it was related to a learning disability as opposed to a behavior problem. And we, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, everything was behavior.
Yeah.
There was no such thing as a disability.
Right.
You were just a rambunctious kid. You just had problems, and you needed to be spanked more, punished more.
Yes.
That was the whole solution. That's the environment I grew up in. You know, it's kind of wait till your father gets home, we'll get this problem handled. He can't sit still. That's when corporal punishment was still, so I got paddled a lot at school because I couldn't sit still. They couldn't hold my attention. I was bored. I was bored out of my mind. My mind was somewhere else. And had they put me, instead of first grade, had they put me in fourth grade, I might have been able to be interested. But it was due to my lack of interest because it wasn't stimulating. My brain and the things that stimulated me were just in certain areas. In other areas, I was as checked out as I could possibly be. Well, that was a learning disability. That was not a behavior problem. All right? I got lost in words that I didn't understand. Algebra, calculus, things like that, trigonometry. Lost on me today.
And we have kids now that have slipped through the system that are older, middle school, high school, and they're demonstrating behaviors. And sometimes that's the same thing. They don't know how to read, or they never had the right intervention to break words down. And so, of course, they're not going to say, hey, I can't read this. They're going to try to save face in front of their friends and show you bad behavior.
Well, you know, it's very interesting that you bring that up because 75% of all children that are in the juvenile system are functionally illiterate.
Yes.
And that 15 to 20% of all families that are involved in some form of social services at the base living level are functionally illiterate. So literacy is a problem, and how we learn to read is also, we have a uniform method, and we're the only nation that teaches people to sight read. And it is a problematic reading method of learning to sight read because it teaches you nothing about reading, it teaches you about word recognition. So when
and that's where early intervention is critical. You know, my county just said this year our focus is back on literacy. And so that early intervention, getting kids in the right programs, there are different reading intervention programs with the reading specialist. In Chapter 2, I talk about how to go through the process. And that's sometimes the thing that fixes the issue for a child is that intervention and that reading program or whatever pull-out program, push-in program they need with the specialist they need.
The book is so full of resources, and you are compassionate and understanding and helping people navigate something that can be very personally challenging and difficult. There's a whole nother aspect, and that is the non-disabled child and how to be a good brother and be a good sister and to be a part of that support team. And it's important that they are involved in this process and not insulated from the process or made to feel less than because they don't have a disability. And so there is a balance. And I think that this book helps you navigate not only a system, but teaches a certain amount of the balance that the team has to be made up of all family members, not just mom and dad. That there
Absolutely. And 2 shows on ABC that really articulate that are Speechless, and that is about a little boy with cerebral palsy and his family and how they have to take care of it. And then The American Housewife. And so it's on. I love it because the little girl clearly has OCD with anxiety, and her mom has spent so much time with her. She's the youngest. That, like, the older sister said, you know, like, well, our bond fell apart because she needs you so much and you're spending so much time with her. So it's funny, it's real, but it's a good educational tool for people to watch who may not have that understanding.
We've been talking with Chrissie Kahan, author of Roadmap to Navigating Your Child's Disability. It's Kahan, K-A-H-A-N. You might think it was Kahan, but we learned early on it's Kahan.
Right.
And we learned about the Jewish connection of your husband and his family. So we're always very happy to point that out. A great new book brought out to us that by the King Khan Publishing LLC, the family team, with wonderful illustrations, incredible amount of tools giving you understanding as to what it is you're dealing with and then how to deal with it. So it's not just a what to and a how to, it's the entire picture in an easy to read and easy to navigate book. It's a resource book that is a strong cover so that you won't wear it out because you'll be using it so much through the course of your child's life. I encourage mothers, fathers, grandparents, teachers, all to get a copy of this book, to have it in your arsenal as you're trying to navigate both the government system, the education system, the family system, and even to educate your church family on what's going on in your life so they can better understand what you're dealing with. Chrissie, thank you so much for being here and being a part of the Igniting a Nation family and part of Revealing the Truth. We're so glad to see you again. Please give our love and blessings to your husband for a happy Thanksgiving, a wonderful Christmas, and a very happy and healthy New Year to you and your growing, soon-to-be growing family. We're just
Thank you so much. I will. You as well.
Thank you so much. God bless.